All right, I think we'll get started, and anyone that hops on can certainly jump in where we are. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Business Support Series webinar. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to having a room of questions. I'm Barbie Holland, sales consultant with the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, and I will be your host today. We're excited to talk about mindfulness and resilience, two topics on everyone's minds over the last few months, I'm sure. With so much chaos and uncertainty blanketing 2020, it's important for us to take time for ourselves. Our speaker today will walk us through his mindfulness practices and how entrepreneurs, employees, and everyone can use these to calm the mind and de-stress. Wow, that sounds like magic, Bryan. Thank you everyone who submitted questions for our presenter. And when we get to the Q&A part, please feel free to type any questions into the chat box. We're just chatting a little earlier before we started, and we want this to be a very interactive webinar, so please share your thoughts and questions. Our presenter and guest speaker today is Bryan Burns, certified teacher from the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, developed at Google. Welcome, Bryan, and thank you for joining us. I'll let you take it from here, and I'll mute myself.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Barbie. And it's wonderful to be here with you this morning to talk about Search Inside Yourself and talk about mindfulness and resilience. As Barbie mentioned, it's certainly, in particular this year, a timely topic and to get into. Well, first of all, I just wanted to mention that there's a couple of things. So this program is designed to be a little bit interactive, but just in chatting with Barbie and Kayla here, because typically we do these programs as a Zoom meeting, and we would have breakout groups. Because of the format that the Chamber uses as a webinar, some of my slides we're just going to do things a little bit differently. But anyways, it will be great. First of all, I want to introduce this RIN, just that I'll use a few times throughout our presentation to begin and end some of the things we're going to do together. And so moving ahead, certainly things have changed radically in the way that we work, in the way that we spend our days over the last 8 or 9 months. I don't know if this looks familiar to any of you. It's a little bit familiar in my life, or something like this, but certainly we all have been undergoing significant change in the way that we relate to how we're working, in the way that we relate to our spaces that we spend our time in and our family situations as well. So what we usually do at the beginning of these programs is we get people talking together in pairs. But what I would like you to do is just take a couple of minutes, 3 or 4 minutes we're going to take on your own to contemplate these two questions. First is, what do you love about your work? And what are some of your biggest challenges? Certainly, as we just looked at and mentioned there, that there's lots of changes that we've had to deal with. So I just want to encourage you to just take a minute or two to think about those. I'll ring the bell after a couple minutes. And once I ring the bell, if you want to add some comments, please do. Thanks, Caitlin. Barbie, yeah, I love the flexibility to get my job done with a great work-life balance. That's great. Love the work that I do. Love that the work I do positively impacts those in the community who are vulnerable. Thank you, Stacy. And Faye, the flexibility of my position in working from home or offsite is a love. Challenges are I love seeing people and interacting. The Zoom and email interactions don't allow to pick up the body language cues. That's true. Tina, I love helping clients. Challenges is gathering restrictions at this time. That's right, restrictions on getting together. And Vicky, I love helping my clients de-stress and reach their goals. Challenges getting my name out there more so I can help more people. Excellent. Kayla is an event coordinator. I love bringing people together. My biggest challenge right now is COVID restrictions and figuring out events in a COVID world. And Stacy, challenge is not having enough people to do everything we would like to do, especially during this time. Mm-hmm. So, you know, often, and I think we see it here, we see a theme of wanting to connect with people. Even before COVID, we all have this need and want to connect more closely with people, and also some of the challenges around doing that and being able to connect closely with people. So to enable us to connect with people, we can use this tool of mindfulness. And what I'm going to invite you to do at the moment is a short attention training. So often when we arrive at meetings or conversations, our bodies are in one place, but our minds are somewhere else. We might be thinking of what we were doing before we arrived or what we're going to be doing after this meeting in the future. So just to get us ready for the next 40 minutes or so, let's jump into an exercise to more fully arrive and be present. And to do this, we'll use this tool of attention training. So directing our attention to the present moment for a sustained period of time. And we're just going to see what that does to our mental and emotional state. So I'm going to ask you just to take a comfortable position, feeling your feet flat on the floor, feeling your connection to your chair, and shift around a bit, so feeling comfortable. Just finding a way to sit where you can be relaxed and alert at the same time. And you might experiment by leaning back or forward, just feeling where it feels the most comfortable, or arching your back slightly. You can have your hands on your thighs, just noticing your hands and your feet, finding a way that works for you. And let's just begin by bringing our attention to the breath. You can close your eyes if you want, or keep them open. And let's take a few deep breaths together. You can let the breath out through the mouth. Sometimes we restrict our breathing without being aware of it. And you can explore relaxing your shoulders, rolling them back and forth, opening your chest. So simply stopping, notice your thoughts, your body, your feelings. What's it like to be here, to be alive right now? Just see if you can be open, curious, interested. Perhaps as though you're noticing your breath for the first time. How do you know that you're breathing? Can you notice the moment the in-breath begins? How it continues the moment it ends? Can you notice the moment the out-breath begins? How it continues the moment it ends and the in-breath begins again? And with your attention, can you follow one complete cycle of breath? If your mind wanders, gently bringing it back to the breath. So let's all bring our attention back to being here with each other. So Barbie's given me a little introduction, and again, in some situations we might be able to introduce each other, but I don't think we're going to do that this morning. But just quickly, I can say a couple more words about myself. That I've been practicing mindfulness for close to 20 years and teaching within a business context for about 6 or 7 years now. And then the Search Inside Yourself program, which we're gonna talk more about, I've been involved with for 2.5 years. And we're really connected to the program because of its interesting aspects of bringing out new scientific information regarding what's happening when we practice mindfulness and meditate. Also information on what's happening within businesses that introduce mindfulness practices, and connecting back to more traditional practices, some of which I was involved with over the last 20 years. So Search Inside Yourself, what is it made up of? So emotional intelligence plus, as I mentioned, neuroscience, and mindfulness is how we package together different things to present the Search Inside Yourself program, which, as Barbie mentioned, was developed at Google. So it was developed at Google starting, I think, around 2007, and then the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute was started as a separate nonprofit in 2014. So the program rolled out of Google and is now managed out of San Francisco by the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. So as a certified teacher, we are a global community making mindfulness and emotional intelligence practices practical and accessible. And together we're working towards a more peaceful world in which all people feel connected and act with compassion. And one of the board members of the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute and people who were involved in the development of the curriculum is Daniel Goleman. He's, of course, the gentleman who coined really the term emotional intelligence, or certainly popularized it with his book, which is about 20 years old now. And he defined these 5 domains of emotional intelligence. First one being self-awareness, so our ability to know our internal states, preferences, resources, and intuitions. And self-awareness is the foundation upon which the other 4 domains are built. It's a key emotional intelligence competency. Self-management, how we manage our internal states, impulses, resources, and intuitions, which is about moving from compulsion into conscious choice. And motivation, so emotional tendencies guide or facilitate our goals, certainly. So the more connected we are to our emotional intelligence, the better we are able to reach our goals And empathy. So empathy being awareness of others' emotions and concerns, choosing to listen and connect with others, seeing similarities. And social skills. So how adept are we at working with others, especially for those of us in leadership roles, leading other people? So life is certainly busy for all of us. And there's just so much going on. We can all relate to this time crunch, never turned off from technology, this always on world. And certainly that aspect of our current world that we live in makes it hard to stay emotionally balanced. And also it makes it hard to put our best efforts forward with what's most important. And it's really not stopping, is it? We just, information is increasing and distractions are increasing, which leads to stress and overwhelm. And the military has a term for this, which is VUCA. So volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I'm sure we can all relate to some of these words in our lives. So the Mindful Leadership Institute in 2010 did a study, and these are some of the actual statistics. They surveyed about 700 people, and they found that 47% of the time we're mind wandering. So on average, people reported that 47% of the time their mind is wandering, not on task. 70% of leaders report regularly unable to be attentive in meetings. So if we're always choosing for our minds to wander, that might be okay, but notice what happens when we're trying to be present. So many of us really find it difficult to be present in meetings. And this may be the most shocking statistic, which is that only 2% of people reported that they actually have strategies to optimize and practices to optimize their time and take care of their energy and minds. So what's the result of some of those statistics? The result is that most of us, most of the time, are operating on autopilot. So what is autopilot? As I mentioned at the beginning, we did that focused attention training to bring ourselves into the present moment. So often with autopilot, our attention is in the past or looking forward to the future. It leads us to being distracted. One of the results is that we can often be very reactive or judgmental. And we're acting based on habit and assumptions. Barbie, by the way, I'm not paying too close attention to the chat, so if something comes up, please feel free to interrupt me as we go through here. So Viktor Frankl, psychologist, prominent psychologist from the 20th century, coined this phrase, which is between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So certainly this underlines that aspect of getting off autopilot, taking that pause and responding in each moment. So the question is, how do we get off autopilot? And as it turns out, there is a way, which is training in mindfulness. And this is where this training comes in. So really simply put, Barbie was asking me earlier as we were getting started, can I define mindfulness? The simplest definition of mindfulness is being present. Just simply being present. And so a few more words. Mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So I'll just say that again. So paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. And then sometimes we add a couple more things, which are, what is our attitude when we're doing that? Our attitude is of curiosity and kindness. So that attitude can also be very helpful in shaping our experience of mindfulness. And what are we doing this for? So it's in service of self-understanding, so self-awareness, building our self-awareness, and developing wisdom. So enabling us to get off autopilot, tune into our own wisdom, and make good decisions. So again, we're talking about this shift from autopilot to aware. Another great simple definition that you could use. So if somebody asks you what's mindfulness, you could simply tell them, well, it's this movement from being on autopilot to being more aware. So self-awareness, like how good are we at self-awareness? That, is an interesting question. Mindfulness serves as the foundation for self-awareness. And as Goleman explained again, self-awareness is the root of all the other emotional intelligence areas. So how can we manage ourselves and our relationships if we're not aware? When we talk again about mindfulness, how does this training happen? So within Search Inside Yourself, and really also within traditional mindfulness areas, I guess, or traditional mindfulness disciplines, we have two different types of ways of developing mindfulness. So there's a dedicated practice, which you can think about like setting aside time and going to the gym. When we talk about dedicated practice, you could be as few as 3 or 5 minutes, or as long as an hour. I guess you could think about it again like a workout. So setting aside time, finding a quiet place, even in your office, and doing some mindfulness practice. And then we also have in the moment or integrated practices. So what I'd like to do next is invite you to do an integrated practice, which is called 3 breaths, or micro practice, we call them. So again, if you want to take a good posture, just again, feeling your feet connected to the floor, feeling your bum well comfortable in your seat, and finding a good posture that feels alert yet relaxed. You can put your hands on your thighs. Take anything out of your hands if you have a pen or anything. So this practice is just in 3 breaths to refresh, be more present, get off autopilot, make a choice about what to do next. And so the way it works is the first breath, we tune into the breath. And on the second breath, relax the body. And third breath, ask what's important now. So let's try it together. I'll lead you through it, and then I'll give you another chance to do it on your own. So first breath, placing our attention on the breath, to the breath. Second breath, relax the body. And third breath, ask what's important now. And I'll just invite you to do that one more time on your own. So how many people noticed a slight shift in their mental state, even in those 3 breaths? Anybody, any comments? Stacy, yeah. And also, when are some times that this practice could be useful for you? Thumbs up, Penny. I noticed a little shift before meetings, yeah, before pitches. Certainly before an important conversation. Tina, useful when I feel like too much is going on to reset, absolutely. And Vicky, in those few minutes before an important call when many look at social media instead. I mean, social media is so addictive, it kind of shocks me sometimes when my iPhone tells me how much time I've spent looking at the screen. And Mike, it would be nice to use this if dealing with a contentious person in debate, although might create some suspense in the other person. Penny, use it as a count to 10 moment. Absolutely, yeah. Regroup and face them out, yeah. So, some of this isn't rocket science, although the count to 10 that we learned when we were kids, we don't remember to do it. That's why it's important to remind ourselves sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. Mike, it is a bit, doing this stuff together or in a group or in a meeting is unusual. I've actually only recently started doing meetings with another practice that we call moment to arrive, which is just inviting your participants or your colleagues that you're having a meeting with to just take 30 seconds or 30 to 60 seconds to just focus on your breath as you're sitting together, either on Zoom or actually in a room together, just to really arrive in the meeting. And I found it to be very powerful. And I've also found that, I think we're getting to the point in our society that most people have some touch points or some experience with these types of ideas and these types of practices, although many of us don't still use them, or we don't have the opportunity to connect with them. But certainly I think what my experience has been that, people appreciate that moment to pause, and it can diffuse some of the maybe nervousness or excitement about starting a new meeting. Yeah. And again, these micro practices, I think it's one thing that Search Inside Yourself has been really good at bringing out. Certainly, I had some of these types of short practices before my connection to Search Inside Yourself 3 years ago, but I wasn't necessarily teaching them as much. I think they're super powerful because, again, you don't need to set aside time. You can do this at your desk. You can do this even as you're walking to a meeting or when you're sitting in a room waiting for a meeting, 20, 30 seconds. And we can really, in that short period of time, shift our awareness and our focus. So a little quick summary already. What we've covered mindful breathing, which we did at the beginning, and 3 breaths practice. So you have 2 practices to take with you when you leave this meeting today. And I wanted to talk a little bit now about the science behind mindfulness that's happening. In the last few years, there's just been this explosion of research in mindfulness, and studies are showing mindfulness enables a healthier mind, greater focus, emotional balance, physical health improvements and resilience, and even happiness. So there are some amazing benefits that we can talk about. We're going to look at some of these studies later, but as you can, basically this graph just charts the number of results that come up on a Google search in PubMed for mindfulness studies. So as you can see, going from 1980 on the left, pretty much none. and over close to 1,000 a year now in 2020, and certainly been growing significantly in the last 10 years. So what are some of these studies looking at, and what are some of them finding? Well, we have in our mind-wandering state something that's called the default mode network, which is associated with mind-wandering and self-referential thinking. It also happens to correlate with unhappiness and activation in brain areas associated, again, with self-referential thinking and rumination. And researchers found that that default mode network is much less active during meditation. So it suggests greater ability to refrain from ruminating and worrying about ourselves during meditation. And in addition, experienced meditators had greater connectivity between the default mode network and the areas for attention management, suggesting that experienced meditators have greater capacity to monitor and manage mind wandering and self-referential thinking. And there is another interesting study done in Europe by a gentleman by the name of Antoine Lutz and his team. And they wanted to know the impact of meditation on stress and reactivity. And they wanted to understand this relationship between anticipation of a painful event and what happens after a painful event. So this was a laboratory experiment, and they had so on the graph here on the right, they had a group of novice meditators as well as expert meditators. The novice meditators are represented in the blue column on the graphs, and the expert meditators in the red. So what they did was they hooked everybody up to a thermode, which is a device that provides electric heat shock to your arm. And they asked participants to report pain and also heat. And what they did was they measured the anticipatory stress, knowing that the pain is coming, and also the lingering stress afterwards. So what they found was that, as you can see on the in the middle of this slide, the novice meditators had significantly way sort of off the chart more reactivity in the amygdala, which is that fight, flight, or freeze area of the brain, compared to the experienced meditators basically had no reaction when they were anticipating that shock to their arm, that alarm system for threats and opportunities. And then after the shock was delivered, what they found was that the intensity was experienced quite similarly between experienced meditators and novice meditators. But afterwards, those feelings of unpleasantness, the experienced meditators were really able to let them drop away very quickly, as opposed to hanging on to that negative experience. So, in other words, they were able to really let things go, come and go easily, and not add stress with worry and rumination. And then, so Search Inside Yourself, we offer a lot of different formats for this program. This is kind of based on the keynote program, which is an hour and can be, and we also have a 90-minute program, then there's a half day, full day, and 2-day. So Search Inside Yourself surveyed participants in the 2-day program, pre-program, and then 4 weeks after. And they asked these questions. When in conflict with someone, I take time to fully understand what's driving their perspective. So we saw a significant shift in participants' answer on that question. And secondly, I am able to pause before reacting. And again, participants really, after having 2 days of practice of Search Inside Yourself and then 4 weeks with the ability to do some of these practices day to day, really noticed a big shift. So mindfulness practice is leading to change in 3 areas: attentional control, emotional control, and self-awareness. So just a little summary of where we are at this point. We need these skills, obviously, for this world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And again, mindfulness is this movement from autopilot to aware. And I think we have a short video here, Barbie. I hope, oh, no, maybe not. So we're going to talk about empathy a little bit and what Google learned from, Google did this project called Project Aristotle, and in its quest to build a perfect team. So there are many reasons why empathy is important, which don't take a lot of research to understand. Empathy is how we understand others and build relationships. It might be interesting to know that empathy appears to form the foundation of effective teamwork and collaboration. So really important research for businesses and business owners, managers, leaders. Obviously at Google, they have Rhodes Scholars, engineers who rock at programming, and PhDs, not to mention a few extroverts, not all geeks, but certainly the conditions for a dream team. But what they really found is who is on a team matters less than how the team members interact, structure their work, and view their contributions. So again, they found these 5 key dynamics for their top performing teams, and psychological safety was the #1 thing, meaning that team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. And then moving from there, the other aspects, dependability, structure and clarity, meaning and impact. So team members thinking that their work matters and creates change. So taking from Google, certainly if empathy is something that clearly most of us would like and is even important for our success in working together, why does it often seem so hard to get people to work together, for people to understand each other? Any comments? And that's okay if there isn't. You keep moving. I find this different lifestyles and ages. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I think, and just to explain psychological safety, I think it's this sense that, when we're in a room and if you're an extrovert and we notice that one person is not speaking, really just it's that emotional intelligence to invite their participation, have those pauses, enable people to participate. And that's sort of what Google's talking about when they talk about psychological safety, enabling people with different abilities, different emotional intelligences, different intelligence, to all have their opportunity to bring their wisdom to the table. Exactly. Life experiences affect who we are and how we act and react. Exactly, Barbara. Yeah. So moving forward, mindfulness again, just, we've covered this a couple times, but it's that movement from autopilot to aware, and empathy, the awareness of others. So one way to look at the challenge of working together is that these same autopilot traits are functioning when we're with others. So often when we're in a conversation, we're not really fully listening to others. Our attention is elsewhere. We're planning what to say, ruminating about the past, rehashing judgments and criticisms about this person, or we might be caught up in worrying about ourselves, worrying about what they might think about me. So I'm sure some of you can relate to that idea as opposed to being fully present. And the question is, what can we do about that? So here again, mindful listening. We're not really set up to do this practice, although it does work very well on Zoom meetings, we found, because as opposed to a webinar, we have the ability to break people out into groups. But I'll just explain to you what we do we do a practice where we have a monologue. And next, hopefully we'll get to do this together again sometime. But in any case, really just what we do is we set people up in groups of 2, and we have person A talk and person B listen. And person A has a full 3 minutes to talk. We give them a topic, and here's the topics. So, and they just have that floor to fully talk. Person B simply listens. They are allowed to nod and smile. We have different ways of communicating other than talking, but we really ask them not to talk, not to interrupt person A. Person A, even if they run out of things to say, they can pause. If something else comes to mind, we encourage them to keep talking. So we just give this gift of undivided attention. If you haven't done this before, maybe some of you have, but if you haven't done this before, it's really a very powerful exercise to do. We find that a lot of people really are surprised by it, this sense of how we don't really provide our full attention to people when they're talking, how we're not able to sit and be present and listen, give the gift of attention. So we do this practice and we switch roles. It really doesn't do it justice for me to kind of explain it to you, but there it is. And then we go into free flow conversation. So does anybody have any comments at this point?
We have a quiet group this morning, Bryan.
Yeah.
Everyone can put your comments in the Q&A, and I can certainly address them. This is your chance to ask any questions. Free advice from Bryan. Well, I'm going to start, Bryan, if you will, ask a couple of questions before we wrap up, because they may be of interest to everyone that's joining us this morning. So I really enjoyed the mindfulness, obviously, is autopilot. I was taking notes, to being aware. And I think it's a really good idea. Maybe, I mean, we have so many calendar reminders coming up in our phones and our computers and whatnot. Might be a good idea to put a reminder in our Outlook or our smartphone or our computer. I don't know, a couple times a day. I know it'd probably be good for me to just take a moment and just be aware.
Yeah, absolutely, Barbie. Yeah, for sure. And that's a great idea. Certainly there's apps out there as well that we can use. And we can also even use simple things like when we turn a door handle, we can use cues like that to remind ourselves to take a mindful breath.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So we did have someone ask if we'll get a copy of this slide presentation, and yes, it's recorded, and we will share with all of the participants after the webinar. So later this morning, we'll send that out to all our participants. So you can certainly have what Bryan has shared with us this morning. So another question, of course, with so much to worry about and think about, how do we find the time and motivation to truly focus on a goal or a project? Because I think, like many of us, and I know a lot of people on the webinar this morning, we're independent entrepreneurs, we're in sales, we're working for non-for-profits. Maybe it's just us. Someone mentioned we don't have enough staff to do everything we want to do. So how do we break that down and find the time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Certainly, just mindfulness can help by prioritizing. It can help by sitting and tuning into our thoughts and our wisdom, what's important to us. When you sit down, if you want to sit down and do mindfulness practice, you can set an intention at the beginning as well. I find that really powerful. So if you do decide you want to sit down and do some breathing for 10 minutes, if you set an intention at the beginning related to that, related to finding the time and things like that, that can be really helpful.
Great, thanks. Can businesses practice mindfulness as a team? That's a really good question.
That's a great question. Absolutely. Businesses can practice mindfulness together as a team. You know, one of the things I mentioned at the beginning was this idea of taking a moment to arrive at the beginning of meetings. I think things like that are super powerful in terms of shifting the culture within organizations, shifting to a more mindful culture, offering people space, giving some value to that pause and the people's ability to tune into their breath and their body. And you know, I mean, I think more broadly it relates to wellness, but certainly, you know, that's one way that businesses can do it. Other ways are setting aside space that people can have for quiet time, and you know, obviously retreats, you know, introducing training like this, whether they want to do it. We do a lot of these types of trainings as lunch and learns, so it doesn't necessarily take away from people's work hours. And also, you know, as I mentioned, there's longer formats for this program. So those are definitely some ideas.
Great. Yeah, the more businesses I see, there is maybe a collaboration room or a little, not very much bigger than maybe a closet, but it's a quiet room or collaboration room or a private room. I see this more and more in some businesses. So we do have a couple of comments. I'm going to go over to the group. So Vicky mentioned that she's participated in something like this before, and listening is difficult without speaking or interjecting. But when you're the one talking, it's really strange not to have the listener interject in any way.
Yeah, I mean, Vicky, absolutely. Like, that's why I find that mindful listening exercise extremely powerful, because it's just not the way that we communicate to each other. You know, people say, "Wow, that was weird," or do all sorts of different comments around it. You know, and again, it does. You know, you've maybe participated in it. If other people haven't, it's a bit hard to imagine what it's like, even though it's a very short exercise. But it really is powerful in, obviously, you know, doing what we've been talking about here, which is trying to shift from that autopilot to aware. You know, we might just gain a little tiny bit of awareness that, oh, I always interrupt people, or my mind is always going to what I want to say rather than giving them my full attention, you know. So it's just, that's that aspect of those type of exercises, develop that self-awareness actively as we're doing it. And again, you know, I just want to reiterate, you know, when we talk about business, all of this programming is targeted towards, you know, as opposed to that maybe the idea that some people have of mindfulness of the monk sitting in the mountains, you know, secluded and by himself. But really what we're talking about here is communication, team building, all these sorts of aspects of mindfulness, right?
Nice. We have a few more comments, a couple of questions. So I do want to get through them because I really value everybody participating. That was Vicky. Penny mentioned. So this is a comment. I do mindfulness when I eat meals. Slows my eating and forces me to slow down and get that break that I need. Focus on flavor and texture. I love it. Yeah. Great, Penny.
Yeah.
Good comment. Tammy has a question. How do we help create psychological safety within our team?
Excellent question, Tammy. Well, like I mentioned before, one of the things we can do is really, you know, training people to allow everybody to have their voice at the table. And I think it's really a lot to do with managers encouraging their teams to make space for each other to be able to bring their own wisdom and knowledge to the table. And I think what happens is, you know, in our just society, like I watch my 3.5-year-old daughter, and she's very outgoing and she's kind of a leader when I watch her with her friends. But, you know, then we also have to remind those leaders, the ones that want to lead all the time, that other people have a lot of wisdom and other people have, you know, things to say. So I think it has a lot to do with that aspect of just making sure that everybody feels comfortable, you know, even the introverts or the geeks, I guess, or whatever you want to, different people within your organization that everybody is valued and everybody has, their seat at the table. And I think that's really the starting point for psychological safety.
Yeah, that is so key. I mean, it takes all of us, right, to make the perfect and great team that we have within our workplaces. A couple more comments. Mike has mentioned, has the world gotten more VUCA? And do you think we work too hard too much as a society, his quotations? Could we do more with less and have a more balanced, mindful, and productive society, sorry. That's a fully loaded question.
I think it's fully loaded. Mike, the former CEO of Search Inside Yourself, which was the guy I met in Toronto, that sort of kind of, tweaked me to this program, is a guy named Mark Lesser, and he wrote a book called Less, Achieving More by Doing Less. So certainly, I think we can do less and be more balanced. And I don't know about you. I'm so looking forward to the U.S. presidential election being over, because I really should pay more attention to Canadian politics and stuff. But I must admit, personally, I dial into the New York Times and CNN and just see what's happening so regularly. And I would say, at least in the North American context, the world's gotten more VUCA over the last few years.
Another question, so this is great, from the participants. Recommended follow-up, Bryan, books, app subscriptions, etc. Maybe if you want to share them with us, it's kind of putting you on the spot right now with a few minutes left in the webinar. If you want to send them to us, we can share them with the participants if you wish.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah. There is a Search Inside Yourself book that we can direct people to, and then there might be a few other things I can send around as well.
Yeah, if you want to share them, yeah. So that's a great question, because that's meaning that people want to follow up and certainly put into practice what you've shared with us this morning, which is really the point. I always say we're all in this world together, going the same direction, all on the freeway. So it's just great to help each other and share best practices, if you will.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay, any other questions? It's your opportunity again in the chat box. So this is great, having some people popping up with some comments and questions. We do have about 3 or 4 more minutes to have a conversation. Bryan, do you have anything you might want to add?
I have a few more things we can do to finish, but trying to think if I have anything else to add at this point. I don't think so.
I do have one more question I'll throw in there, just because I think it might be important. How can you translate your emotional intelligence into productivity? Because I mean, anyone that's working, either a manager or an employee, an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, we all need to show our productivity, right?
Absolutely, yeah, no, for sure. Well, so emotional intelligence, recognizing, understanding, and taking appropriate action on emotions. So again, recognizing, understanding, taking appropriate action on emotions is the definition that I like to use. So certainly, I guess, I don't know if this answers directly, Barbie, but if we're really triggered and we make a knee-jerk reaction, that's not gonna necessarily, it might result in it might really give us a bad result. So again, the more we can practice self-awareness and be able to more quickly recognize those emotions and take appropriate actions, the better. And I think just one other quick thing I want to say about that, which we didn't have time to practice today, but one of the big things we do is we also talk about emotions and really how they manifest in the body. So when we talk about mindfulness and self-awareness, like the next step is body scan, doing it more regularly, doing it on a longer basis, because really we know from science that emotions are physiological phenomena. So we experience that gut reaction, we experience that knot in our chest or whatever. And it is common across all humans that we experience emotions in similar ways in our body. So we can train that and we can develop that awareness. Yeah.
Right. Great.
Hopefully I'm not sure if that answered your question, Barbie, but.
Yeah, it does. And thank you. So we do have a couple more a comment and a question. A few minutes left. Love the concept of moment to arrive. I'm going to do this at an upcoming event. Stacy shared that with us. So great takeaway, I think, for everybody. And Stacy's going to put it to practice. Thanks, Stacy. Dennis, one question. Any comments on the topic of breath control techniques?
That's a good question, Dennis. Sorry, first of all, for Stacy, the only quick thing I would say about the moment to arrive is we always tell people that it should be self-referential, because we don't want to tell other people, you need a moment to arrive. So the way we term it and the way we teach it is, I could use a moment to arrive, and then inviting other people to join you. So just a quick thing on that. And Dennis, so, I practice some yoga as well, where we do breath control. In the mindfulness practices that I've done, we don't really, all of our breathing should just be natural breathing. What I've noticed on the 3 breaths is my breath slows down when I'm specifically thinking about the breath. But when you're doing that initial practice that we did, the focused attention practice, I just would encourage you if you are going to do a mindfulness practice and try 5 or 10 minutes on your own, just doing that breathing and focusing on the breath, just allow your breath to be natural. So that's really what I would encourage. Just allow a very natural breath. Don't try and control it. Just breathe naturally and normally.
Nice. Oh, natural. All right. So sadly, we're out of time. I think we.
So we want to take the last 30 seconds and just. Oh, sorry, Barry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll just comment, and then we will take the last 30 seconds. And we want to thank everybody for attending and supporting the Chamber webinars. We're here to support our members and keep you well engaged, informed, and connected. Thank you, Bryan, so much for sharing your expertise with us. And it's so easy to forget to take care of ourselves, and I can't wait to try a couple of your practices. Just a reminder also that Bryan will share a couple of books and app subscriptions as you requested, and we'll be sending a link to all participants with the recording and all the information that we discussed. So yeah, Bryan, before we log off, you want to take a moment and
practice? Yeah, absolutely. So I got a couple more slides. So just remember, again, connecting with others. Autopilot, aware, connected is what we're trying to do. These are the practices we did: 3 breaths, mindful breathing, mindful listening. I apologize, we didn't do shift to connection. This is from a different slide. And we talked about these. So also SIYLI.org, Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute.org. We don't take ourselves too seriously. We call it SIYLI. So you can check that out. And I'll just invite you again before we go, just to have one more moment of mindfulness, just to feel your feet on the floor, feel your upright, alert, yet relaxed position, and just tuning into your breath. Just a few breaths together before we end. Thank you.
And that's it. And that's a wrap. So thank you, Bryan. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Stay dry and be safe.
Pleasure. Thank you for organizing this, Barbie.
Thanks. You're welcome.